In tennis history, there have been a lot of prodigies, players that have an almost instantaneous affinity for the sport from the moment they pick up a racket. This allows them to progress at a faster rate than the vast majority. Even if you are a prodigy though, tennis is ruthless. The toll it takes on competitors both physically and mentally can chip away at the most talented upstart. This is why when you talk about the pinnacle of tennis, becoming a Grand Slam champion, there have only ever been 8 male teenagers to win one in the Open era. This video is about the youngest, the sensation that was the 5'9" American Michael Chang. Chang was born in Hoboken, New Jersey on February 22nd, 1972 to Taiwanese parents Joe and Betty. Surprisingly, the wonder kid Chang only started tennis at the age of 7 when his parents introduced him to the sport. Initially, he just played on weekends too. This didn't matter though, as Michael developed rapidly right off the bat. This wasn't just from a technical side either. On top of this, he was mentally tough too, a natural fighter. The young maestro was made to play the game. However, initially the diminutive Michael didn't really have any expectations of turning pro or anything. He regularly played though, and as he got older he entered junior tournaments. His quality would shine through and he had great performances. This prompted his parents to move to California as it offered more tennis opportunities. And it didn't take long before he was competing in national tournaments, usually entering in older age divisions. In the next few years he won numerous events. Michael's win at the Nationals would prove to change his future plans big time. He'd be granted entry to certain professional events, including a wildcard to the 1987 US Open. For a 6-week period, the amateur Chang entered 5 events, and he was actually having some success. He made it to the second round of the US and also won a challenger event. The 15-year-old Chang had gone from unranked all the way to 163 in the world. This was confirmation he had the ability to become pro. It was just a question of when. Ultimately, Chang opted to skip the conventional route of college before becoming pro and went straight for it. He was extremely young, but he had the maturity and game. Michael Chang turned pro just before his 16th birthday. US fans were excited about this talented youngster's transition into the pro game. However, although Chang was a great player with rapid speed and grittiness, some experts were skeptical about Chang's success in the pros considering his small stature. Chang did well in his first pro season though, getting many wins on tour and even won his first pro title near the end of the season. His year-end ranking was amazingly 30 in the world. The doubters were wrong and players were beginning to recognise the wonder kid as a future threat. Saying this though, no one would have expected what he would achieve the following year. Chang began the 89 season having decent results, but it wasn't until the clay period in May, specifically the French Open, where Chang really shone. The now 17-year-old Chang had benefited greatly from the experience a season on tour had given him. He had already participated in multiple Grand Slams and wasn't intimidated. He went into the 1989 French Open with the confidence of youth, endless ability and tenacity. He had high expectations, even if nobody else gave him a chance. Chang won his first 3 matches of the event without much of an issue too. This included a demolition job on fellow American teen and future superstar Pete Sampras. Chang was through to the 4th round, but the 17-year-old's opponent couldn't have been any tougher. He was up against the world number 1 and 3-time French Open champ, the great Ivan Lendl. Chang was outmatched by the experienced Lendl in nearly all areas. To the eye, the 29-year-old Lendl eclipsed the small youngster. This was a real David and Goliath clash. A year previous, Lendl had handily beaten Chang in an exhibition, and the world number 1 didn't seem to be impressed with his game. Saying this though, when the match began, Chang showed some quality tennis. His defensive prowess in particular was clearly world class. However, he was playing the best of the best, and the steely Lendl eventually began wearing on Chang, forcing mistakes out of the 17-year-old in key moments. After nearly 2 hours of play, Chang had found himself 2 sets down. Despite playing pretty solid stuff, the result seemed inevitable. However, Chang wasn't one to give up. His fighting mentality was well beyond his years. The teenager kept himself in the 3rd set, and when the opportunity arose, he took advantage, breaking Lendl. Amazingly, he managed to keep his lead too, and took the third set. This was actually the first set Lendl lost all tournament. Chang was reinvigorated. In the fourth, he continued pushing and building on his momentum, using the crowd's cheers as fuel. And then, in the sixth game of the set, Chang broke a flustered Lendl. The world number one attempted to break back the following game, but the determined Chang held his nerve, stopping multiple break points. The usually cool Lendl was now beginning to lose his temper. The world number one was getting dismantled by a 17-year-old. Things weren't all on Chang's side though. The 3-hour battle at that point was taking its toll on the teen, and he began to cramp up. Chang was able to grit it out though, and kept his lead, taking the fourth set. The match was astonishingly going into a fifth and final set, an improbable, extraordinary comeback. The French Open crowd were captivated by this electrifying fighter. Chang had a great start to the final set, breaking Lendl in the first game. However, he was pretty much running on fumes at that point. Completely fatigued and dealing with unbearable cramps, Chang had to resort to varying his stroke, using moonshots to give himself more time in points. Lendl wasn't fresh either though, and the tactics Chang was implementing was giving him success. The teenager held his serve and took a 2-game lead. Lendl rallied back though, breaking a depleted Chang. The youngster later admitted that around this time, things were so bad for him physically that he actually considered retiring the match. As he put it though, he had an unbelievable conviction in his heart. Chang kept pushing. Both players would break each other again in the following 2 games. Then, a persistent, dogged Chang with the crowd behind him broke for a third time in the set, making it 4-3. The composed youngster hammered this home by holding serve in the 8th game, taking him 1 game away from the match. Famously, in this game, the drained Chang opted to go for an underarm serve at 15:30. This tactic would win him the point in this crucial moment. After this, Lendl seemed to have capitulated and was broken the following game, losing the set and match. Chang had shockingly come back from 2 sets down to beat the world number one. Amazing stuff. This match and the underarm shot would go down in French Open history as one of the most memorable matches and moments of all time. Chang's journey was far from over though. He was through to the quarterfinals of the French, and he had a whole lot of rehabbing and recovering to do before the next match. He did too. Not satisfied, a confident Chang got through both his quarterfinal and semi-final matchups, winning both in 4 sets. Unbelievably, the 17-year-old had made it all the way to the French Open final, and in his second year of competing in the event. Another tough test awaited him in the final. He was up against the dominant serve and volley legend and 2-time slam champion at that point, Stefan Edberg. The whole tennis world were glued to this final. Chang had captivated the public with his youth, grit and exciting style of play. This was a real fairy tale story. Chang would again be an underdog against the powerhouse Edberg. However, he got off to a fantastic start, winning the first 5 games of the final and taking the first set by 6 games to 1. In the second set, Chang would continue his success and would break Edberg in the 5th game, taking a 3-2 lead. Chang looked as though he was going to cruise to the title. Edberg had other plans though. The resilient Swede would break Chang the following game, which would ultimately lead to a big swing in momentum. Edberg would break the team once again and take the second set, making it 1-set-all. Edberg would then race to a 3 games to love start at the beginning of the 3rd set and ended up holding his lead, winning the set 6 games to 4. Chang was now 2 sets to 1 down, and Edberg was the one sprinting to the finishing line. The Swede would break Chang in the first game of the 4th set too. However, just like Edberg in the second set, Chang responded, breaking straight back. This didn't deter the Swede though, and he continued to put pressure on Chang as the set continued. The teenager would now find himself having to deal with breakpoint attempt after breakpoint attempt in pretty much every service game he had. However, Chang would do what he did best, which was battle tooth and nail for every point in the most pressure moments, and miraculously, one by one, the breakpoint attempts would disappear. Even if Chang felt he was beaten, he wasn't going to give up. Amazingly, the teen would manage to hold his serve the next 4 times of asking. Edberg would hold serve too, although in a much more clinical fashion. Despite this though, it was 5-4 to Chang, and Edberg was the one serving to stay in the set. The Swede was now clearly rattled by the amount of breakpoint attempts he couldn't convert, and this showed in the following game. Edberg would make a couple of unforced errors, including a double fault, and found himself 30-40 down in the game. Chang now not only had a break point, but it was for the set too. In the point, the teen would fire back good return off Edberg's serve, leading to the Swede volleying the ball into the net. Chang would win the point, taking the fourth set, and he only needed one breakpoint attempt. The French Open final was going into a fifth and final set to determine the champion. The 17-year-old had found himself in another mammoth contest. The start of the fifth set was consistent with the whole match, which was a real seesaw battle. Edberg broke Chang in the first game. However, the inspired Chang wasn't going to be beaten that day. He would again break Edberg straight back, and this would prove to be the last bit of resistance Edberg had against Chang. The teenager, as he did against Lendl, had seemingly dismantled one of the best players of his generation. Chang would go on to win 6 of the next 7 games, taking the final set 6-2. The teenager had become the French Open champion. The fairy tale ending was complete. Chang had sealed his name in history as the youngest male Grand Slam champion of all time, a record that stands to this day. Chang had also become the first American male to win the French Open title in over 30 years, and the first player of Asian descent to win a slam. So a lot of records broken on that day. Chang's run would go down as one of the most shocking results and improbable stories the game has ever and will ever see. Amazingly, for the remainder of Chang's career, he wasn't able to recreate the success he had in 1989 and never won another slam, although he did make it to multiple finals. Regardless though, he still had a lot of success as a player, winning over 30 titles, including 3 at Indian Wells. It's undeniable though that Chang will always be most famous for those magical 2 weeks he had at Paris when he was just 17. Incredible stuff. Hope you enjoyed this video looking at Michael Chang and his journey in becoming the youngest male Grand Slam champion in history. Watch out for more videos coming soon. Bye guys.